Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Ryan shares his interesting path from graduating as an engineer in rural Canada to pivoting to get his MBA from Oxford several years later. Learn why he ended up joining E&Y's transaction advisory services upon graduating, and how he was able to land a hybrid job in private equity and venture capital within 1 year in London. We also hear why he decided to leave it all behind 5 years later for a new degree to get back to his technical roots, and what his new business is up to now. Enjoy. All right, Ryan, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Hey, thanks so much, Patrick. Great to be here.
So it'd be awesome if you could give everybody a short summary of your bio.
So my bio, I'm a bit of an oddball, I think, but I'm a passionate WSO reader, by the way. So thanks very much for everything you put together. It's been such a valuable resource for my career.
Thanks for the kind words.
So my bio has been, so I graduated from engineering in my native Canada a bajillion years ago. And I spent a brief period of time there working as an engineer before I decided I want to sort of make the jump into finance. And I did that by doing an MBA. I went to go study at the University of Oxford. Did, I guess what you'd call a triple jump into ultimately sort of venture capital and a bit of PE, where I did sort of mostly real estate, private equity. And did that for many years, about just over 5-6 years. And ultimately decided to go back across the table again into entrepreneurship after that. So I went back and did another master's degree in computational data science and used that as the foundation for starting the business, which I now run, which is a small team of data scientists. We're called Zenlytics, and we are building a no-code data science tool.
Very cool. So how should I think of like Zenlytic? It's Zenlytic is how you say it?
Zenlytic, that's right, yeah.
How should I think of that in terms of like competitors, or where can people learn more? Just to give you a little plug. Zenlytic.com, I assume, or something there.
Zenlytic.com, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So go to Zenlytic.com. Think of us as an analytics tool that's capable of answering deeper questions with your data. So a lot of the tools can answer the what questions really well. So things like, what were my sales last quarter, or like how many users did I have yesterday? But they sort of fall flat when you start to ask the why questions, which is, why did my sales go down in March of last year? Or simply, how can I increase my active users? And those are the sort of questions you go to ask a data scientist for usually. Our tool essentially automates that, looks deeply at the data, checks thousands of combinations to give you all sorts of new insights, and helps you answer sort of the why questions with your data.
Really cool.
And Zenlytic.com.
So let's start all the way back at undergrad for you. So I'd love to hear, so was finance ever on the radar, or were you like engineer all the way when you were in school?
No, finance, when I was in undergrad, finance was actually a very murky prospect for me. It's something that I always thought was really interesting. But to be honest, like I went to undergrad in engineering in like a smaller school in the middle of Canada, and it felt so far away to me. I didn't think it was on the radar. So like it was kind of a what if kind of scenario. And I guess I overestimated how far away it was, because it wasn't crazy to make that transition. But it certainly wasn't my top priority coming out of undergrad.
So when you were graduating, I think around 2005, you joined a firm as an engineer right out of the gates. And what was that like? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it what you expected?
Yeah, it was fine. So I joined a sort of a mid-sized engineering company, and I was actually doing hardware engineering, building stuff, which is cool. And there's there's trade-offs between that and finance for sure. It was great to actually be building real things. Like at the end of the day, if you did a good job, you could walk out and sort of kick that thing, and you can kick it with your boot, and you're like, yeah, we built this, which is very rewarding and very satisfying. You feel grounded. You actually feel like you're very productive. I guess the only reason I switched is because I was still sort of landlocked in the same place, and I wanted to diversify out. And YOLO, man, you got to try out and go out and try as many things as possible in this life. So I always wanted to take a step of abstraction, which is kind of that trade-off. you lose the ability to kick the stuff, but you also get to look and see the forest from the trees as well. So I guess finance was my paradigm, was I can move up and sort of start to look at the bigger picture and make sort of like, more broad decisions.
When did you start thinking about, so you were an engineer for about 4 years, almost 5 years. When did you start thinking about an MBA, and how did you go about thinking where you wanted to go? Because, going to Oxford, you went to London, right? So going across the pond, it's a ways. So why there? And how did you think about like what you wanted to do after? Did you know going in?
No. So I guess, so starting from the start, I guess after about 2 years, I decided to make that jump. And my sort of paradigm in life has always been to try and do everything for 2 years. Like if I set out to do something, plan to do it at least for a couple of years. First, you owe it to yourself to give it like a fair shake. Also, you don't want to like a real jumper and run from thing to thing, basically. So after that sort of 2-year period, I guess as I gave it some serious thought, so okay, I'm going to start making the decision. And it was kind of just one of those things where once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen for you. So I'd slowly digest it. It was about a year before I actually applied, and I took the GMAT and I did all the necessary precursor work. The reason that I chose Oxford was a couple-fold. First, because I was trying to diversify geographically. I figured the best way was to try and do it in a fairly
Is this when you came across Wall Street Oasis for the first time, or no? Later?
I think that was probably about when I started reading Wall Street Oasis, and I'm pretty sure, like I can't pinpoint any exact moment when I was reading it and I had an epiphany, but I'm pretty sure that it played a role in making that transition. I remember poking around with WSO and sort of seeing how, it's actually that was a long time ago too. So there's like fewer people at it, but now it does a really good job painting a picture for what life in finance is like. I think that is one of the helpful things about Wall Street Oasis is you really understand that.
Yeah.
And that was still, it was more at a nascent stage back then. That was a long time ago, man. But
I don't know, man. I just saw a thread today that made me like shake my head. It was like $50 million in private equity by age 50. Am I crazy? Like this guy had a whole spreadsheet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy, all of his assumptions are super rosy.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because at that point in time when I was an engineer, I was very, I've always been analytical, but I had a spreadsheet, and it wasn't that 50 million thing, but it was just like I had taken my engineering job, and this is about year 2, and I'd taken my salary and added 3% every year or whatever, and I figured out my mortgage and my taxes, and it was a big spreadsheet, because I click and dragged it all the way down to like 90 or something like that. And I had this like kind of dollar precision. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is good. And I was like, okay, if I go down this road, like I can see all these every quarter or whatever. I had
by age 90, I'm sure you had like $20 million or something crazy if you reinvested it.
Yeah. Well, is that something like that? I mean, there's some power compound interest thing where I could retire at 45, and it was I think it was actually just like single digit billions, which is, again, I guess it's kind of testament to like being landlocked in like a.
What was your pay coming out of school at that engineer, the entry level engineer, like 60,000, 70,000 Canadian?
It was about 60 grand Canadian. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think it was 57,000 Canadian was my first paycheck. And I remember getting it.
Not a bad guess.
I felt like, I thought, hey, the guy was to say, it's your job to know, man. Yeah. No, but so you nailed it. And I remember getting that job and feeling like I'm rich. This is great. I'm making a ton of money. And, it was,
that's a ton of money, right? And especially in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a low cost of living place. And but no, it was enough to cover my needs. I didn't feel like I was struggling at all or anything like that.
But there was something more. You kind of wanted to take a layer higher, not just for compensation, but also just thinking abstractly, not being so like concrete with everything you were doing, not like having to touch everything, but actually thinking theoretically.
Yeah. And I wanted excitement too. Like that's what the spreadsheet led me to believe. I dragged it down. I said, okay, look, like, all right, this is good. I'm set for this. I'll be comfortable my whole life. This is great. But I looked at it. I was just like, huh. And I was like, this looks pretty boring. Like, I don't want to have this all split out. So then basically, as soon as I made my first step change, like I threw out that spreadsheet and I realized that one change in things, you have to make a new spreadsheet every time. So it's probably not worthwhile to actually like expect to follow that the whole way.
Keep redoing it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, there's a whole thing about planning there. But
so
anyways, I chose Oxford.
Yeah. Were there other careers outside of like finance, or why MBA? Like were you thinking investment banking, M&A? What were you thinking of going to get your MBA?
Yeah, so when I went into my MBA, I had a few things on the radar. Private equity and venture capital were probably the top of the list. And then there's also just in consulting. So the usual stuff. Going into it, I had a pretty poorly formed understanding of all those going in. It's really,
fair.
Again, what I found online, and like I talked to a couple of people, but it wasn't a really thorough process. And I really planned to spend my time there, figuring that out, answering those questions that I wanted to do.
Which I wouldn't recommend to people, by the way. Do that. The more people you can talk to.
Why is that?
I would say the more people you can talk to before to get a really good sense. I mean, at least for now, how it is now, this is over 10, but I was getting the MBA at the same time. I feel like timing that, especially PE and VC, it's super competitive. And so not having that framework going in of knowing, I need to be networked with these people, or if I don't already have those networks built out before I start the MBA, it's almost impossible. So I don't know, that was my perspective. That's my perspective. I mean, it's not like you have to have it all figured out. I think the MBA is really nice to explore new things, but you can have a real nice leg up if you know what you want kind of going in.
Yeah. I think that's very fair.
Okay.
And actually some of the,
even more so with the MSF programs, like the 1 year degrees, like you get on campus and you're recruiting for your full-time job within like a month or two.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Actually, one of the reasons that I chose Oxford was for the 1 year program. And, the European programs are all generally a year, 15 months long.
Yeah.
And, my approach to that going in, where I was kind of murky at the start, I think that might be achievable with a couple of years, and you've got a, summer break in between to go and try something.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot harder to do with a 1 year program, be it MSF or MBA. So
tell me how when you got there, what was it like?
It was drinking from a fire hose for sure. Like I said, I didn't have a great understanding of any of this stuff going into the MBA. And it was kind of like there's that 1 year was like the elastic snapping of me catching up with everything basically. Which worked well. I mean, it was a really, really busy time, and it was like a really, there's a lot of work involved, but it was like a really exciting time too. So it was a fantastic year.
Did you feel like, looking back, do you wish you were at a 2 year program, or do you feel like it was enough to kind of get you up to speed and you don't regret kind of going there?
Yeah.
Not that it's obviously a good school, but like, would it have been better for you without the finance background? Because I know for me and for people who had already done like investment banking, a lot of those, half the courses you're just cruising. Whereas somebody who's like from even an engineering background, like all of a sudden you're building financial models and you're like, I know you're technical, so you probably picked it up really fast, but it's like, if you haven't lived in those programs for 2 years, it's different. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, also I feel like, so the coursework I still found to be a piece of cake, to be honest. I feel like people with a sort of quantitative kind of background can pick up the level of quantiness for an MBA quite quickly. And it's because it's such a diverse class. You've got like people who are very, rigorous mathematically, or you have people who are not. And I feel like when you've got to capture that whole spectrum of people, the people who have done the rigorous stuff before, analytically at least, you really don't have that problem. And it's a little bit, you might have an adjustment getting into soft work. What was drinking from the fire hose then? So the coursework academically wasn't too tough for you, but was it just everything being new other than that? Yeah. So to your point, I mean, there's a lot more than just the coursework. So like you said, I was doing my first job applications within like 4 weeks of arriving basically. And like, the big three consulting firms, which were on sort of my target, I was like, okay, now I can kind of figure out like if I want to be a consultant, and they're like, all right, apply now. And I was like, really? Okay. So I jumped right into I'm writing these MBB applications and then doing case study interviews for the first time. At the same time, I'm also trying to do my research about what's going to happen next. And then I'm doing, meeting new people and sort of like getting into class. Why are you doing research? Sorry, why are you doing research of what's going to happen next? What do you mean by that? So that's, that's like, I started applying for consulting, but I really had to decide, while I was learning how to do this case study reviews, do I want to be a consultant? Did you even want to do it? Yeah. So you're in the interview saying, I would love to be a consultant. And you're thinking like, do I really want to do this? And trying to figure out, do I want to do something else? Or can I do private equity, or can I do VC? Yeah. Got it. I see what you're saying. Okay. And then, like you say, there's only a year. You got to do a lot of networking. And especially when you're doing like a triple jump, like I did, it takes a lot of work, just to set up that next career path move, basically.
For sure.
So those and all those things put together, combined with just MBA life and stuff, you keep very, very busy at it. And that's sort of going back to your question about 1 year, 2 years. It's a tough call, and there's merit in both. I'd say if you're going to do a big career jump, the 2 years is probably best, because you have more time to do that. You have a summer break to do an internship in the middle. Having said that, both my master's degrees were 1 year programs. So in a way, I kind of feel like I got a bit of a.
You save a lot of money going for 1 year.
yeah, you save a lot of money, and you save a lot of time too. It's like, I get two for the price of one in a way. So that's great. And I will say, I remember the very last day of my year at Oxford, we were having our sort of wrap up party, and I was sitting there, watching the sunrise after the party or whatever. And I thought to myself, you know what, if I go back to, my exact same job beforehand, it's like someone snapped my fingers. It's like just a year ago, my exact same job, exact same pay, exact same trajectory. This was still all like 100% worth it, like just to have had this experience. And, a year felt like a good idea at the time, but another year would be just so much so much fun and so much like happiness and just life satisfaction to keep experiencing this for the full 2 years as well. So it's a tough call, but there's merit to both. But if you can, do the two, but there's nothing wrong doing the 1 year as well.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about how things evolved. So you got there, you were kind of doing case interviews. Was that like just a real struggle? I assume it was a super struggle. Were you just drilling with your other engineering buddies or gals in the class? Or like, who did you team up with, like, to help get you ready?
Yeah, we did this. We started there's like the case study club, and they kind of pair you off and you do practices. But I'd say the real value here, so like the most valuable people for that club actually were the previous consulting analysts that had graciously volunteered to sort of help with answer these questions and everything, and they were essential, I would say. So like I could think back to those folks, and if you're starting out your MBA and you want to go to consulting, I'd find those folks early and just find some kind angels who are willing to spend time, because they really understand how it works. And there's really two parts to those case studies. I think they get a bad rap because looking back at them now, I understand the rationale. I think they do a good job of just testing your sort of common sense approach to how, they're a good test for how consultants think. Like they're good.
I think case interviews, I think people are adopting them more. If anything, private equity firms are adopting them. I don't have anything against them. I think they're just tough, and you have to kind of understand the structure. And if you've never done them, it's really hard to get into that. And
there's really two parts to it, right? I mean, there's one is just having a bit of commercial sense, right? Which is hard to cram and teach for in 4 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
The next part is actually sort of just sort of knowing how to answer their questions, which you can absolutely cram for with the analyst. And the third part is being able to communicate effectively, and just answer stuff in a very well-structured way, which you can also sort of cram for in a certain extent. It's kind of halfway between, but those latter two, you can really both
improve them,
jump ahead by working with classmates. Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell me how that all kind of evolved, and then how you started looking at your options as the year went on, and where you ended up coming out of school.
Yeah. So we basically, drink for that fire was I applied for a few different roles. So I spoke with the consulting folks. I spoke with the oil and gas folks, actually, because that was my engineering background. I did a bit of oil and gas engineering. That's what I was engineer in Canada. And I sort of went down, the ideal would be the buy side route, basically. So, I was going for the PEVC path. And those involved a bunch of discussions with all sorts of people. I guess my journey. So first off, I had traction in all three of those, sometimes in unexpected places, I would say. Interestingly enough, the only route that I had sort of, traction through the formal channels, and where I actually ultimately got my first job out of undergrad, was in that sort of finance side of things. I had a few consulting interviews, had a few oil and gas interviews, but it was hard to really distinguish myself, through the mass of people that are all going through those interviews, basically. And those ones didn't have any formal traction. On the flip side, those ones had some informal traction by meeting people at events and the usual ways that I feel like are probably the most effective ways to get jobs. So I think
So
to
how,
this day,
yeah. So how long did it take you to kind of get that full-time offer? And what's typical, like the end of the year? Did you have to wait till the end of the year? Were you in the spring before you kind of got that, or most people like getting stuff locked up in the fall?
no, it was most people actually took longer.
Mhm.
There's a couple that got it right in the fall, which just stressed the heck out of the rest of us. Basically, obviously, like, oh no, I don't have my job yet. What am I doing? What am I going to do? But the vast majority, I'd say it happened within 6 weeks of graduation, maybe even less. So
Oh wow.
I was yeah.
It was
So
also in a
no,
tough time of the economy,
yeah.
the world economy was.
This was also 2010,
Yeah.
so things were kind of melting down, and
Yeah.
it was a different kind of meltdown than now as well. At least for the time being, we'll see what the future brings. But some of this is still valid for the current situation.
Mm-hmm.
I was slightly ahead of that curve. I actually took the formal job that came through the formal channels in the end, which was at Ernst & Young, which I was only there for actually very briefly, but I took it for a few reasons. I mean, it was a good foothold to stay in London because it was a London-based offer, and I took a job in the transactions due diligence group,
TAS,
which is
basically.
TAS, exactly.
Yeah, transaction advisory services. It's a great place if you want to do some M&A type work. Oftentimes, there's people who start there and end up transitioning to investment banking, or it's a great career. But so you wanted to stay in London, but why? Why not go back to Canada, US? You just loved it?
Yeah, I mean, so first, like I said, it was a fantastic year, and I really just enjoyed integrating into British culture, and I really like living there.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to stay just from a quality of life perspective. Secondly, if I was going back, I wouldn't be going back home anyways. I had one consulting offer. I'm from Edmonton, Canada, which is
the Oilers.
the Oilers.
You're
That's right.
killing me. I'm a Bruins fan. You guys crushed my heart when I was 8 years old and 10 years old. 1988,
yeah.
Boston Garden. Oh. The lights went out. You know that game?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
I was at that game.
No kidding. Wow.
And then the 1990, I saw Gretzky holding the cup. I think, Gretzky was still with you guys in 1990, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
91 or something. Yeah.
I think he left 90. Or he left for the Kings after, but I saw the Oilers with the Stanley Cup in the Garden, the old Garden.
That was funny.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's
40
right.
years old, man.
No, it was really weird because I was a kid when that was all happening too, and I was like,
how old were you?
It's funny because
how old were you then?
I was
4.
In 90, I was 8, so I was born in 92.
Okay, so you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But it's funny because like I just thought the Oilers just won. That's what we did, Like it's like Edmonton just wins a hockey game.
It's like Boston sports fans are spoiled now with all the other teams winning championships every year. Like one of them,
right? Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, Edmonton less spoiled these days, but. Anyways, yeah. So I had a few offers in Calgary, which is as close as I could have come, basically. Yeah. But there's no real finance industry in Edmonton. And if I wanted to do one of the target roles that I was looking at, then there's no way that I was going back home after that, anyways. So I might as well try and do it someplace that I was really passionate about. Sure. So yeah, and it looked like a neat gig. So I started with Ernst & Young. That was always a bit of a transitionary step for me.
Did you? I think it was. Did you see it that way when you accepted the role, or did you think, "Hey, I'm going to give this a fair shot"? Because I know you had said earlier, like try to stick in a place for 2 years. But is it something where you just like it was totally different from what you thought, or what?
No, the goal was actually to spend 2 years there as well, and that's what I planned. But I really wanted to get onto the buy side. Mm-hmm. Part of the whole decision making process that led me down. Away from the passive sort of consulting oil and gas stuff was also I was looking for work for something a little bit smaller, and I know Ernst & Young is a bad way to do that, and that's why I kind of figure it's a transitionary step.
Yeah. But good brand, good brand to have on your resume. Brand.
Yeah, good brand, and there was a smaller team within Ernst & Young as well. To be fair, so there's only this little group is not like their giant audit service where there's thousands of them. Yeah, our entire operational transaction services team. At the time, I don't know, 50 people tops.
In London or globally?
Yeah, in London, but there's only a few pockets around the world as well. So it felt like it had a fairly small team ethos. So that's one of the things that attracted me to it, and then it also had a transition to what I believed would also be a really small team, a smaller company, which kind of mid-market buy side. And yeah, so go to that. I said, we'll give it a shot, and I'm going to keep my ear to the ground basically for other opportunities. In the actual legit buy side of things. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and I wasn't really actively chasing after things, but
Had
just
you
doing
been
the
reading
usual
Wall Street?
networking.
Had you been reading Wall Street Oasis that said if you don't have pre-MBA private equity experience, it's almost impossible to make it into private equity? Had you heard or come across it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You
Yeah,
knew
that
it
was
was very hard. You knew it was
yeah,
unlikely, but
hmm
that
yeah,
didn't
for sure.
deter you. Why didn't that deter you?
Um, well,
You like to do hard things.
I like to do hard things. No, it's funny.
You're good at
It
networking.
is.
You figure I just have to meet the right people.
I'm actually pretty bad at networking too. It's
Okay.
I guess it's the. I mean, to quote the great Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Fair.
So I figured, I had to try, and I will say that I think my career, despite this one transition, has always been marked by um, having value and being unique. And like there's it's, and I think if it was less difficult than I anticipated, I guess, to actually make the crack into the buy side. Let me put it that way. And part of it serendipity, it takes time. You have to create those opportunities and everything. Part of it is networking, but I think it's also just finding the ways that make you unique and positioning yourself. And it's a little like sales. People always talk about like how do you be a good salesperson, and they think it's being this really like charismatic, like smooth talking, have an answer for everything type person. Um, I think that the vast majority of that is just smart positioning and making those opening those opportunities up in the first place. And selling getting a job is like selling yourself, so it's like it's the same thing. Like you have to make sure that you position yourself uniquely and find a compelling reason for someone to buy, right?
So yes, absolutely, 100% agree, and it's a skill you can get better at.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Yeah,
you
it
feel
absolutely it's
like
a tradable skill.
did you you obviously got some of that training with all the case interviews you practice you did and all that stuff, so that probably helped. But once you started at E&Y in TAS, did you immediately? You said you kept your ear to the ground, but were you like actively applying to places? Was it 3 months in where you're like, okay, I need to start ramping up, or what was that like? That transition? I want to hear what your break was and how you even got
Yeah.
the interview, or did they make it a habit of interviewing from this group?
So I was not actively applying at all. No. My approach was the great thing about the UI thing is, again, the great thing about like planning to be there for a couple of years is it gave me the time to make sure I did things right as well. So it's not like I wanted to, like, I didn't have a
You weren't rushing.
I didn't have a ticking clock above my head, and time was on my side basically, which is great. And like one thing I always like to ask myself is time on my side or against my side, and that really changes how you act. Well, a really famous venture capitalist named Tomas Tungus talks about that from Redpoint. He talks about how he uses a basketball analogy where like, if you're the leading team, you press the game, you speed it up, right? If you're the better team, you try and speed it up. If you're the worst team, you try and slow it down, right? And you try and like slow your advantage. So it's kind of like that, and it's time on your side or not, right? So like I had time on my side, so I could just be make sure that I found something that was actually a really great fit. And so I wasn't actively applying for stuff. I was mostly just kind of networking, meeting people.
Like using
friends.
LinkedIn and stuff. At this point, was LinkedIn big, or it was still pretty small?
LinkedIn was smaller, but still sufficient.
So how were you networking specifically? Were you using like MBA alums? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, mostly friends, alums, and sort of second degrees, and
Yep.
Like everything else, it was. I was using the pretense that I was in a new city to sort of like leverage that and just sort of saying hi to people. People were, and I think still continue to be generally pretty open to have chats like that.
So
I know I take a lot of chats like that now.
Like the first 6 months, let's say at your E&Y position, how many people did you like have an informational chat with? And tell me, like, how did you go about it? Was it more just a curiosity thing, learning what they do day to day? Was it purely informational, or did you drop any sort of hints that you were interested in what they did? I think this is really important because getting that subtlety and that nuance is really important. And I'd love for the listeners to kind of get a perspective of how you kind of played with that, not to seem like you're too pushy or whatnot.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if they were friends, especially if they were friends and connections from friends, it can be a little more touchy. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And there's an adage in the VC world that you hear today, even, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to raise a round, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for a round, right? So if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money.
Yeah.
And I think that's true when you're job hunting as well. Jumping in and just asking, "Are you hiring right now? Can I get a job?" It just kind of turns people off, and it seems a little bit disingenuous, and it seems a little bit like desperate. And so I would wholeheartedly recommend just approaching people, asking for advice and tips and understanding what they do day to day and things like that.
Were you genuinely interested in what they were doing day to day?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And, that 12-month fire hose there's still, a lot of water at the other side of that hose. So
yeah,
there's a lot that I didn't know. And it was also, there's certain like regional influences and how they do venture capital in London is a little different than how they do it in the Valley, which is different from New York. And so like, just going and having those conversations gave me a ton of insight. And it also helped me, once to talk to people, to answer your question, I try and have like a few coffees a week, sort of on a rolling basis, 2-3 coffees, just when I have a chance. And it starts to give you a feel for the ebb and flow of how, the market that you're operating in works, and you get a better understanding of, what's basically happening, like where people are hiring, and if there's new funds coming on the horizon, if there's people that was raised, if there's activities happening. So once you get your finger on that pulse, you get a much better sort of sense. And I imagine sitting from your position, you probably have your finger on that pulse of many industries. So I think you know what I'm talking about. But
people assume I know a lot more than I do. I can tell you that. They're like, "What is your take on this private equity recruiting?" I'm always laughing because I get reporters contacting me all the time saying, "What is going to happen with private equity recruiting now with COVID and work from home?" And I'm like, I don't know. It's going to go even earlier because they can it's going to be remote anyway. So they're going to go in August. I'm on the record now, 2 podcasts in a row saying it's going in August.
You're first, folks. Yeah. So anyways, it was a couple of touch weeks, very casual. Just talking about, how they do the job and how they make decisions and what they like and what they don't like. And I never really explicitly pushed,
were
"Hey, will you hire me now?"
Private equity professionals, or were you targeting that specifically, or were you just meeting a whole bunch of folks?
I was targeting PEVC. And so I was meeting others occasionally, but those would be the bulk, I would say, is, folks in those two sort of buy-side professions.
And on the VC side, I assume you were playing up your engineering angle a little bit, or tech angle. How did you, when they asked you like, "Oh, give me your spiel"?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why I chose VC was, I felt it's a really, really interesting field for starters. So I like VC a lot, which we can get into why VC later. But that just plays back to, being unique, play to your strengths. And as an aspiring VC, being fully technical has always been really, really helpful. And I remember going in with ideas for how to ramp up their DevOps, basically, which is like, oh yeah, like you guys. So basically, every VC has like this no code solution where they sort of brewed together a bunch of pipelines and a CRM for, it's kind of hack together a way to manage their deal flow. And so a lot of those chats, I try to add value in every chat, and I'd give them tips on, oh yeah, so you could take that thing, and if you added this little Lambda function script here, you could actually automate this part, and then you could prioritize these. And I'd sort of bolt onto their systems and add some sort of. Were
they like, "Hey, can you come in and do that for us?" Did you ever get somebody trying to get you to come do it for them?
Yeah, no, I did it with the fund that I went up working for. So that was one of the reasons, I guess, where I made that jump. But so like people.
So tell me your break. Let's. That's a good transition. Tell me like what was the break? So you ended up meeting a professional at this PE fund, and looking at your LinkedIn, it looks like you were doing kind of both PE and VC almost at the same time, or like what was that about?
Yeah. So this is a fund called AGC. They're a great group, and they're sort of a mid-sized private equity firm.
When you joined, you remember the assets under management around that they were managing?
Yeah. So when I joined, it was probably. So now I believe it's up on the website, so I can say I think it's. Last I checked, it was north of $5 billion.
Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 billion when you joined, or something like that.
So it was close to a quarter of that or so when I joined. Yeah, it was something much smaller. So I was cool. It was a relatively new fund. I was there with roughly the first 10 people or so, and they grew that a lot over the time that I was there, and they grew the AUM a lot of the time that I was there. So It was a great experience because it was growing. But it was also a great break because they were relatively new to start out. So they, just understanding my finger in the pulse and seeing where things were. I knew this new fund was sort of stepping up, and I ended up getting a bunch of introductions to one of the sort of founding partners of that fund, basically. And I had a couple of ways in, which I think was impressive. I had a couple of friends sort of put me in touch.
Meaning you had multiple references from several friends.
Multiple references, which is always a powerful thing. And even to this day, if I get introductions to someone from two different people, I'm like, okay, take this person seriously. So I had that.
But why did you take me seriously? Just because you knew WSO?
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
It was an amazing brand. I love WSO.
Thank you.
It's been invaluable. All this is, this whole journey has been guided, reading WSO.
We'll take all the credit. I love it. Yeah, we'll take all the credit. No, so okay. So you're getting kind of multiple intros to this partner who's they've already raised fund one, or are they in the fundraising process?
They have fund one raised. They're already investing, but they're very early on in that investing, like the first fund, basically.
Very cool. And so tell me how I assume you went in like trying to add value right away.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, did the intern spiel, and I really just we had a great connection too. So like, this is, like I said, I was being very optimistic and waiting for someone who I thought would be great to work for in some sort of fund that was a good fit. And I even at the time, I always believed that being in a rapidly growing place is generally great for a career, right? Which is one of the reasons why I like small companies, because they can grow rapidly like that. It's really hard to grow when you're 30,000 people going to 31,000. But yeah, so like they ticked all the boxes, and the work was interesting because it actually had both private equity and venture capital. So like they were a private equity fund. This partner that I spoke with, he managed the venture capital fund. So I had a chance to just do sort of both sides of that equation, which is cool. I spent a lot more time on the venture capital side of things, but I did a bit of.
How did you even get into the process? Did they have any sort of like interview process where you paired with all the MBAs? Did they even interview MBAs? Were they trying to get kids out of banking? Tell me how that went.
Yeah. So at the time they we set it off, and they had a need for one internship, and I guess a few things happened. I mean, first, I think I ended up already having conversations when they started launching that internship. So like I was early in the process. I have honestly spoke to a handful of people, but it was not your typical, milk round interview 500, second interview 250, and then like pick one kind of thing. So it was, it's definitely a smaller applicant pool as well.
But it's an internship. Is this a paid internship? And did you have to quit in order to take the internship?
Yep. It was a barely paid internship, and it was a paid internship, but it was not a long-term sustainable solution for sure. And there was nothing guaranteed at the other side of that internship as well. So I was giving up your 100,000
secured
job,
whatever.
Yeah,
it was.
That's right.
100,000 pound job,
right. Something like that. Yeah,
something around there.
So something like that.
For a job for only a 3-month stint, paying you a couple £1,000 a month or something.
Yeah, that's right. And exactly. And I wasn't doing it for the money, but I was thinking long term. And it was kind of a bold move. Yeah. I know when I sort of leaned out to my family members for advice, some of them were kind of like, I don't know, Ryan, like this seems risky. And I thought, yeah, I guess it's risky, but this seems like a good shot. And looking back, I feel like that was actually a really, really valuable tool to make that transition. I'm a big believer in the internship.
What was a valuable tool? The internship itself?
Yeah, the structure of doing the internship, I think, is actually really, really helpful for both sides. I mean, it was great for me because it let me really feel out the company and get a good sense for what I'd be doing, and be very like methodical and figure that out. It was great for the company for the same reasons, as well as like, you can sort of like get a feel for the candidate, and then there's sort of like a local environment. It's not, you don't feel pressure to try and fit a square peg in a round hole if there isn't a fit.
But you had already had conversations with the partner here, and so when you kind of came in and put your hat in the ring, tell me like how you communicated that. Was he like, what are you doing? Why would you leave your position for an internship with us? Did he warn you at all? Because I would be a little bit uncomfortable having known you and talked to you and trying to give you advice. If you were like, actually, and I'm going to quit my TAS job that's paying me really well to come intern for you, almost with like there's almost an expectation on me to take you full time. So how did you kind of?
He clarified that for sure. And he's like, we don't know what we're doing. This is supposed to be 6 months. And like after that, we don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Okay.
And yeah, so he was upfront about it. And I accepted that risk as well. It was a unique opportunity, right? Like you say, it's difficult to crack it in general. I was, again, sort of like a unique background, and this is a company that I really wanted to work for. So I was like, you know what, people kind of said, are you sure you want to do this? But there was never really any doubt in my mind. And just my gut said it was the right move. So I just jumped in and went for it.
And so what was the worst case scenario? You go 6 months, they say no. At like month 5, they say, hey, you better start looking, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of back in the job market. Okay.
Yeah. Back in the job market. I probably could have gone back to EY if I wanted to.
Yeah. Okay.
But
so that didn't happen.
I could have landed my feet.
You were there for 5 years.
Yeah, there for 5 years.
So tell me how things evolved from intern all the way up to principal or VP, however you want to call it. Tell me how things evolved. And yeah, I'd love to just hear what it was like day to day. Anything you can share with the audience would be great. Especially coming from like the engineering background now with the MBA. Did any of the stuff you learned, was it applicable at all? Or was it just like fire hose again and you learned a lot on the job?
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. They're a great fund. And honestly, there's a good chance I'd still be working there today if I hadn't moved to New York. But the experience was, again, drinking from a fire hose in a different way. And this way it was, there was a clear outset. So I knew where to look. And I sort of, it was guided fire hose this time, at least. So there was a little more understanding about what I was trying to do with it. Before you drink the fire hose and you're like, you learn about case study rooms. You're like, all right, if I'm, am I going to be a consultant? So if that's the case, I guess I should remember this stuff. And I might not even end up using this in the end, but I should probably remember it just in case. So now when you have that purpose, it actually gets a lot more streamlined, a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it was busy for several reasons. Again, because I was making that sort of jump into PVC was sort of just new workflows for me and new approaches. Also, they were a really fast growing firm. So we were all hands on deck, just, having that continued success basically. So they,
so were you doing a lot like when you, as the internship, and then did they give you an associate role? What was the title after internship? And when did you hear that you were going to be staying on and getting a full-time offer?
Fairly late in the game. It was,
fairly late, you said?
Yeah. It was funny. They hadn't officially announced it, and they're kind of, I remember the discussion actually. It was like, I was supposed to finish up at Christmas time, and it was probably, it was probably
sometime in November,
late November, maybe even early December. And I was talking with my boss, and he's kind of like, so when are you leaving for the holidays? And I was kind of like, probably the 17th, and I'm going to take off then. And he was like, okay, and when do you want to be back? And I was like, we haven't talked about this. And I was like, I'm probably not going to be back. Like, I'm not coming back in January. I thought we're done. And he's like, well, assuming we can work everything out, when would you be coming back? And I was like, I don't know, January 2nd. And he's like, okay. And like at that point in time, I was like, okay, so they're going to keep me on. Like, they
so you didn't even know until December. Why didn't you push? Why didn't you push? You didn't feel like you didn't want to you didn't feel like you had the place to do that as an MBA? Like, I'm surprised you didn't force the issue earlier.
I could have forced the issue. I was happy to spend the whole time doing the internship. Again, it was a little bit like that last day of the MBA. If I went back to
even if I go back, it's worth it.
This has been a great experience.
Would you recommend though, not pushing there? Because what happens if you had said, yep, okay, you're done, good luck? Then you would have been in the holidays starting a new year with no job and no pay.
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to do that? Like, what about rent?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to accept that I wasn't going to be starving in January either way, but like, I mean, I guess I hoped that they were going to do it. I obviously, apart from continuing those conversations while I was an intern and still talking to people, I didn't have like a huge amount of leverage to push it, to be honest. Like, it's not like I could have said, okay, do it now. So, but I did it as diplomatically and tactfully as I could, have those sort of nudge it in the direction I could and get some sort of understanding like that. but they didn't confirm it until fairly late in the
Oh, so
game.
there
Yeah.
you were nudging a little bit. You were kind of like, "Hey, how are things going? Can we get a review?" kind of thing. Where you
Yeah, things like that. And I was,
okay.
collecting feedback
Wow, I'm surprised
and
they left you hanging that long. That's kind of mean.
yeah. To be fair, I kind of, we were having a great experience, and
You
just
had
the
a
sort of
sense.
trajectory.
You had a sense
Yeah,
because you were improving.
I,
The feedback was
yeah.
getting better.
I
Okay.
had a sense that we had a great fit. We were doing really interesting things, working well together, achieving a lot. So I had a good sense it was going to work out in the end.
So I don't have you too much longer. So tell me how
Yeah.
things kind of progress. So you associate, or what's senior associate? What's the title they gave you? And then do you mind telling me like why you ended up leaving? It looks like a move to New York.
Yeah, for sure.
And specifically, yeah, maybe quickly touch on your time at McKinsey for a little bit, and then we'll go fast. Go.
Okay. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Fantastic experience. Great fund. Would probably still be there. I made the jump, started out as associate, kind of worked my way through, and left as sort of like a mid-level person, VP principal type person.
Mm-hmm.
The work evolved as you'd expect. Started off, supporting deals, running charts, running the analyses, yeah,
Yep.
doing the basic work, and then ultimately sort of leading deals, taking board seats, spending a lot of time with the companies on operational improvement.
Did you enjoy that more than the deals?
I enjoyed both, to be honest.
Okay.
The deals are nice because they're a well-structured process.
Yeah.
There's value in that. It's actually, they're a little messy, but they're cleaner than trying to build a startup for sure.
For sure. Okay.
But then it's more rewarding to actually do the building as well. You're growing the pie instead of like slicing the pie, and so it is nice to actually work and get your hands. Again, you can almost kick those things once again. So it's nice to have something you can kick. So so anyway, did that. The reason that I made the jump out of this firm was because I moved to New York, mostly to be with my wife actually. So it was there was a girl, and she wanted to move to New York. So I said, we'll go to New York. Let's do that. And this fund is a London-based fund, so they don't operate in New York. And when I came across,
did you get married in London?
Yeah, actually MBA class. So
okay.
we
From the MBA. From the MBA. Very cool. So you ended up getting married in London, but she wanted to go to New York. Is she from New York?
No, she's from Japan actually, but she's an entrepreneur herself, and her latest business was an online dating business. And New York is a good place to build an online dating business. So she said, let's move to New York. And I like New York a lot, so I said, let's make the jump, sure.
Okay.
And so went there, and the jump to New York was actually, long story short, I used that as a chance to cross the table, which is the number one piece of advice that I give to every aspiring venture capitalist. I used to run little sessions back at Oxford when we do the, do you want to be a VC? And the first thing I always do is ask everyone's questions like, okay, so how do people here want to be a VC? And every hand would shoot up. So how do people here want to be an entrepreneur? And like sort of half of them would go down. And my message would always be then that like, listen, like VC and entrepreneurship are sort of two sides of the same coin. So if you don't want to be one, you probably shouldn't be the other. You should probably be interested in both. And in fact, there's this crisscross where if you want to be a senior VC, you should probably start as an entrepreneur. If you want to be a senior entrepreneur, you should start as a VC.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, I live by that ethos as well. And I've always wanted to start my own thing too. So I used that as a chance to cross the table. And I said, I've learned a lot in finance. I've learned a lot about how venture works, about how private equity works. But now I'm going to go and do it myself. And that was part of a long transition where I did it pretty methodically, where I went back to school, got back to my technical roots, used that. That experience was really built to help find fantastic co-founding team, which worked beyond my wildest dreams. My founding team of my company just fantastic.
So you were, just for the listeners, you got a master in science from computational data science from Harvard, right?
That's right.
1718. So you, in the move kind of stateside, were you doing that? Was there like a campus in London, or you'd already moved? Did you move to Boston for that? How did that work?
I was living in New York, but I went to Boston for the week. So I was commuting and back on the weekends.
Got it. Okay. So you did that for a while, and then you had already kind of moved though, right? You were at McKinsey for like 10 months or something doing like stack.
Yeah, there was a brief interlude there as well where it was actually always intended to be a short-term project. It was supposed to be a few months. We extended it out.
Okay.
But just for something that interests sake, and I've always thought McKinsey's a great organization. So I was helping them build out their new fast growth tech team.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about when this idea formed. Was it while you were getting the degree, the computational or the data science degree?
Yeah, the data. So like we had a few ideas and sort of like a rough shape of how we wanted to sort of redefine analytics when we started. We started midway through the data science degree, and so we were double teaming the finishing the masters as well as starting Zenlytic. We actually started in a bit of an unusual way, which is we spent a good amount of time at the start doing straight up services data science consulting. And we were consulting data scientists. We did that for a couple of reasons. First, to get to sort of bootstrap the pre-seed, funding, which is great, and then also to really understand where the problems are in the marketplace, and understand how companies use their data. Understand the opportunities and the gaps and how they're not using their data very specifically. And that worked swimmingly. We worked with dozens of companies of all sizes, from startups to Fortune 500s. And really understood this sort of overwhelming problem where we have more data than ever before.
How did you get those? How did you get those consulting gigs while you were still in school? Is it just through networking? Like, who was it? Your co-founder bringing most of that, or was it you?
I'm the senior person on the team with the biggest sort of network, so I was doing most of the sales work.
Yep.
And it was a bit of combination of own networks plus professional consulting networks plus a little bit of
sharing
sort of lead generation.
What your engagements were? They like $2,000 to like $20,000 type engagements, or like how?
But more than that, usually we'd
great.
We did a couple of really small ones at the start, but I'd say they generally started at maybe 50 grand and went up from there.
That's great.
Yeah, and it was generally I'd say it's like six-figure mark. So.
And you knew basically like the type of, you knew that you could bring a lot of value to these companies who had a lot of data, so it was an easy kind of sell for you guys.
Yeah, again, and this is going back to the point of positioning and why it's important to be well positioned. Is when you're a team of expert data scientists, that is just a very scarce commodity these days. So the sales process was fairly straightforward. Every company in the world right now wants to add more analytical rigor. They want to add machine learning and artificial intelligence to their businesses, and they lack the capabilities. So most of them lack the capabilities to do so. So, it was a fairly straightforward sales process. People are generally quite enthusiastic, and it was good because we spent most of our time actually delivering instead of selling, which just helps speed that flywheel up to building Zenlytic. For
sure. Yeah. And I assume Zenlytic is almost like you're taking all the learnings you're getting from those initial clients and trying to build the software around it to make it more scalable. Is that the idea? Like in terms of the business model, like eventually, like you want to be able to take the data, plug it into this system, help them answer a lot of interesting questions faster. So you guys aren't doing it all manually.
Yeah, that's right. But basically the goal is to automate ourselves. And we've ramped down the consulting at 100%. We're just, now deploying the product in the real world. But yeah, so it's like, it's
sounds like it's going great. Have you raised any rounds?
No, so one of the goals that I had as a venture capitalist was to put off VC funding as long as possible, which I think is a good adage for every business. I think a lot of people raise for the wrong reasons. I wouldn't raise venture to build a product, for example. I'd raise venture to scale a product.
Yep. Don't you feel like you're there?
Watch this space.
Watch the space.
Watch this space. Yeah, we haven't fundraised anything yet, but we'll watch the space.
Got it. Fair. Okay. Well, anything else before your story is super interesting? Anything you want to share for the younger listeners out there that may kind of want to follow in your footsteps or are curious about your path? Anything like looking back that you would have changed or anything foundational you want to share?
Let's see. There's a few. Before we started the discussion, there's a few things that came to mind that I wrote down. Said we should talk about this that haven't come up.
How when you're PEVC today, getting into VC when you don't have a banking background. Overlap between financial analysis and data science skill sets.
Yeah. That's a whole new kettle of fish. We got to skip that one. So I would say first thing is if I were aspiring to get into the buy side today, especially with VC, number one is to start a community. And you hear these stories of people that start the 5-minute VC podcast or the whatever it is, the various people that are building communities of people to discuss venture and tech opportunities, start a deal list, whatever. I think that would be the first way to do it. Start a podcast. I would say the one really interesting thing is I've been really fortunate in my transition, but when I look back, I'm overwhelmingly struck with the sense of everyone in business school is so like focused on how to get a job. Um, they don't ask themselves, "Am I going to be good at the job in the first place?" You know,
Yeah.
and it's like it's getting a job is one thing, but if you're going to be like the 30th percentile investment banker or whatever, like that's don't get that job. It's not going to take you anywhere. So I think a big part of that is asking the right questions as well. And then if you do decide that you're going
How
to
do you
be good,
know? How do you know if you're going to be good at it or not? Just really look at the senior level and what you need, the skill sets you need to be honest with yourself, or is there other ways?
yeah, I mean it's about having those conversations. I know actually a lot of people. I can't really speak to banking that much because I've never been a banker, but I remember some of my friends had those conversations with bankers, and senior bankers who were very successful, and they said, I wouldn't recommend getting into this business unless you're a certain type of person, this type of person. And for most people, a lot of them categorically said, for most people, including me, I don't know if it was worth it. Like this approach. And looking back, I don't think this is the right path. So like speaking with people, this is especially why it's good to ask that advice and just get them talking candidly, because then you can get a good sense for if you'd be happy in this job and if you'd excel at it. And a lot of those are sort of hand in hand; they should happen together. So, anyways, if you do, and if
at a certain base level of intellect, yes,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then if you do decide you want the job, I think the name of the game nowadays more than ever, as the number of applicants for every role increases, it's be unique. Emphasize what makes you unique. Now that I've been in the seat where I'm hiring a lot of people, I know exactly what it feels like to get a big stack of resumes that are all really exceptional, really, really strong candidates, but they all kind of look the same. And quite often, the one that sort of stands out is the one that has a slightly different skill set that can add value in a unique way. So the most powerful way to position yourself is quite often, intersection of two things. I think is always a great way to do it. You're good at both finance and technology or whatever. But have a simple positioning that's unique and makes you stand out from the crowd.
That's great. I love it. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time to join the podcast. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. It's been a great chat. And let me reiterate that I am just an absolute disciple of Wall Street Oasis, and I've always loved it. It's been an invaluable resource for my entire career. So thanks so much for doing what you're doing. Appreciate it. And say your startup one more time. Oh, Zenlytics, Zenlytic.com. No code data science. No code data science. Check it out. And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.